Alright guys, welcome back. Continuing on brewing our pumpkin or butternut squash beer. I've already transferred all of the wort out of the mash tun and I'm starting to heat it up for the boil now. What I like to do, I run a system similar to Tasty McDole of the Brewing Network fame. And what he does is he runs his wort out of the boil kettle into a Blickman hop rocket. Now, normally this hop rocket you fill with whole leaf hops and kind of use it as a filter as well as the hop back. What Tasty likes to do is he likes to invert the hop back. So normally you'd have this right side up, but he's actually got it upside down. And if you look into the hop back here, you'll see in this case I don't actually want to add hops. I just want to use this as a filter. So what I've done is fill up a bag here with rice hulls. And I've packed it in really tightly. And the theory behind doing this upside down and before the pump is that it actually sucks down on that bed of rice hulls and creates a very tight filter bed. So that's what I've done there. From the hop rocket, I've got it going down into my March pump. And from the March pump, I've got it coming out there into a Blickman Therminator. And you'll see here, I've actually created kind of a stand, brew stand, out of my Blickman floor burners with the leg extensions. I drilled holes in here so that I could mount my Therminator directly onto my Blickman burner. And coming out of my Blickman burner, I have a inline temperature and oxygenation assembly that I've put together. I'm not going to be doing inline oxygen today, but if I wanted to, I could hook up the inline oxygen here. And on the other side, we have a temperature gauge, so when I'm finally cooling this thing through the Therminator, I'll be able to see what the temperature is. Now from there, the wort comes out here, and it would go into my conical or into one of the carboys that I'm going to be using today. And one of the other things you could do is actually recirculate the wort if you wanted to create a whirlpool. Today I'm going to be doing a whirlpool by hand and not actually circulating it, but if you wanted to do that, that's what you could do. So I'm just going to put our lid now onto our hop rocket. And it can be a little tricky with the seal here, getting that on. And then once we do that, all we need to do is put on our nice band clamp here. And now I can tighten this up. We're going to have this sealed and form a nice filter bed in here. Now what I'm going to do, you might wonder whether or not these rice hulls are sanitary. I doubt it. So what I'm going to do before this actually starts boiling is I'm going to recirculate this through my system for about 10 minutes. Right now, even before the boil, so that it will actually sterilize the Therminator, my oxygen assembly, the pump, and as well as my hop back here. So I'll begin that in just a moment here. The reason I like to do it before the boil starts is once the boil starts, you get a little bit of cavitation issues sometimes in your pump, and it can make it kind of difficult to recirculate. So we're getting pretty close here on temperature. Go ahead and get this ready. Tighten this thing down quite a bit. And now, let's get this ready to recirculate. Bring it back into the boil kettle. Alright guys, we're back now. Just moving along here with our pumpkin beer. So far I just finished a little bit ago recirculating the hot wort through my system to sanitize everything, and I did that for about 10 minutes. I'm doing a 90-minute boil. I typically do 90-minute boils to help drive off DMS and just to get some nice caramelization in here for this pumpkin beer. What I'm using today, I'm about to add some hops. I'm using some high alpha German Magnum hops. Now these are about 13.5% alpha acids here. This is a very clean hop. this beer is not at all about the hops. It's all about the malt and the pumpkin and the spices. So I just want something that's kind of gonna get out of the way and just balance out some of the sweetness a little bit. So I've added about 3/4 of an ounce of German Magnum hops right now, and I'm adding them with about 60 minutes left in the boil. So I'm going to go ahead and add these to the boil. This is one of my favorite parts of brewing. When you first have the hops hit the boiling wort, you get the best smells. So I'm just going to stir these in here a little bit. Alright, so from here we got about another hour to boil. Then we'll come back towards the end and I'll show you how I kind of run this through the whole system, hook up the cooling system, and then finally transfer it to the carboy. And you'll see at the end as well, I'm not going to be doing an inline oxygen system today, especially during the summer when I can't get my wort temps down to where I want immediately. Kind of need to chill it for a little bit, and then I'll add the oxygen and finally pitch the yeast. So we'll be back in about an hour. Hi guys, we're back now. We're getting pretty close to the end of the boil here. Probably have about 10 minutes left in our 90-minute boil. You can see I'm having a beer here. I don't condone the use of alcohol, but every once in a while. Anyways, for the last 10 minutes of the boil, I want to add a couple of things that were going to be pretty critical here. I'm going to add a Warflock tablet. This is to help clarify the beer. It's going to be especially important here with this pumpkin beer because it's going to be kind of murky as it is. So I'm just going to break up this tablet a little bit and kind of put it in the boil. I don't think you have to break it up, but I'm going to definitely break it up. And perhaps the most important thing that makes this distinctive is a blend of spices. So earlier this morning I ground up a blend of spices. I don't use the pre-ground spices. I kind of make my own blend. What I've used here is about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I've also taken about a ½ teaspoon of allspice, about 3/4 of a teaspoon of ginger, as well as about a ½ teaspoon of nutmeg. And I ground the nutmeg fresh from the nuts. It's so much more fresh than using ground nutmeg. So, anyways, we have about a couple teaspoons worth of mixture here, and I'm going to go ahead and add this to the boil in the last 10 minutes. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to make a tincture with alcohol of these same spices. So I'm going to let that sit for a couple weeks here later on today. And then what I'm going to do is, after the beer comes out of the primary fermentation, it tends to lose a lot of that spice flavor. So I'm going to take that tincture and kind of add it to the mix based on what I think it tastes like. So I'll add it a little bit at a time until I feel like the flavor is right. Another thing I'm going to do in the secondary fermentation is add a couple of Madagascar vanilla beans. This is a kind of a semi-clone of a Southern Tier Pumking beer. And one of the things they do is they put vanilla in the beer, and that's one of the things that makes it distinctive. You make pumpkin pie, you would do the same thing. So it kind of gives it that full effect. Alright, so we got about 10 minutes left. I'm just going to let these spices kind of steep here. And then what I will do in about 10 minutes is I'm going to do a whirlpool. It's going to allow all of the trub to kind of settle into the middle of the pot and allow me to drain off relatively clear wort. Whatever is not contained in the cone of trub is actually going to get filtered out in my Blickman here. So, all right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes, and until then. All right, guys, we're back now. Added all the spices in. Our beer is now finished up. And I've done a whirlpool just with my mash paddle to get it spinning, settle the trub out in a cone in the middle. And what we're going to do now, you'll see my system. I have water coming in here to my therminator, and the excess water is coming out of here. Brewing is a very energy and water intensive practice, so I kind of like to save as much water as possible. So I have my water coming out of the therminator going back into a pot over here so I can save it and heat this up and use it to clean. So I've gone ahead and opened up the valve on the Blickman here, and this thing is filling up now. What we're going to do is we're going to run this into a carboy today. So This is a better bottle. These things are great, really easy to work with. You see I've got a bunch of star sand in here. This won't affect the flavor at all. Usually I work with a conical fermenter, but my conical fermenter's cooling system is designed for 10 gallons. Today I just wanted to do a 5-gallon batch. So I'm going to go ahead and run this down into the fermenter now. And I'm going to turn on our pump. And this may go a little slow at first. It takes it a little bit for this to get a nice pool coming out of the Blickman hop rocket here. But once it gets a nice suction going, it fills up pretty nicely. Alright, so far this is coming out pretty slowly. Like I said, this will take a moment to kind of get going. I'm going to fill this. This is really hot. It's definitely filled up with hot liquid at this point. And it's probably going to take a minute. It's going through a pretty thick bed of rice hulls that I put in there to filter out. So it is going to have a little bit of difficulty being able to get through that, but it will eventually get going. Now you'll see over here, we've just started this and I've already filled up almost, this is a 15-gallon pot here. So you can see I've already filled up 10 gallons in just a minute or two. So this is very wasteful if you don't collect this. Obviously I'm not going to be able to collect all this, but I'm going to try to get what I can. Let's see if any of the beer is coming out of the fermenter. At this point it's going very slowly. I'm going to have to crank up the pump here a little bit, and hopefully this will get going here in a moment. Now if this does slow down quite a bit, you can take the lid off of the Blickman hot rocket. Previously I had to, when I was recirculating, I kind of had to move this around a little bit. You'll see now if you look down there, it is moving, it's just moving very slowly. And it's very slow to come out of this through that hop bed. I'm actually going to take the lid off of this just to show you. Sometimes taking the lid off of it can make it move a little bit quicker. I'm going to move this. If you open this up, you'll see that it's actually completely filled with liquid at this point. And it's having a hard time getting initially through that bed. I'm actually going to just leave this loosely off here and see if that helps a little bit. Alright guys, cheers. We're just finishing up here with our butternut squash or pumpkin ale. You see we have it right here. We transferred about 5.5 gallons or so of the pumpkin beer. Actually a little bit darker than I was expecting. If you look at it, it's actually looking more like a porter, but I think if you were to pour that in a glass, it would come out not quite so dark. So, got that transferred. Carried over a little more shrub than I was hoping. I had a little bit of issues with some of the beer coming through the filter, and I had to kind of tweak the filter a little bit, so I carried a little bit of that over. If you look right now, doing not the fun part of brewing, which is the cleanup, I've actually got a pot here filled with hot PBW, which is just a cleaning solution. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually recirculating this. So this is going through my pump, through my Terminator, and through my actual oxygenation system. So what this is going to do is help me to dislodge any of the materials that got in there, help me clean it up. And in a moment I'll kind of reverse the flow so that it's good to do a kind of a counterflow back through the plate chiller to kind of dislodge any debris. So this is going to take a little bit here, and then once I'm done with this, I'll rinse this all through with some hot water, and that'll be it. So I'm pitching this with some American sort of Cal L yeast, Y yeast 1056, and got a couple vials of that using a starter that I put on the stir plate over there. I'm going to probably pitch somewhere around 64 degrees, maybe let it heat up a few degrees as we go along. Usually like to pitch a little bit low and then let it rise up. Other than that, till then, see you in a few weeks. We'll actually break this out and get to taste it.